Many people talk about the ups and downs of married life, but no one really prepares you for life after your spouse passes away. Welcome to Widowhood Real Talk with Tina, a safe place for widows, widowers, and their friends and family to talk about love and loss. Find comfort as you listen to honest conversations between Tina and invited guests who've experienced the loss of their forever partner. Share their stories of love, grief, and healing. You are not alone in this journey. Join today's episode and discover a wealth of resources and learn how to connect with others who are traveling the same path. This is Widowhood Real Talk with Tina.
Welcome to the Widowhood.
Hi, Tina.
When you hear that, what do you think? Welcome to the Widowhood. What came across your mind?
It's almost like, how did I get here? I'm
Right?
in a hood.
I don't know what I mean, but hood to me means family and the connection. So for some people who are not accustomed to that word, I could see the meaning of that. But it's like a widowhood. Like, how did we get here? That is
It's
an
the type
amazing.
of hood that we're in.
Exactly. I'm going to read your bio so the guests can know a little bit. I'm sorry. I apologize, podcasting. I'm going to read your bio so our audience can learn more about you before we get into this conversation.
Okay.
And yes, I am of the reading glasses team now. Addie Green is a sensual movement educator and instructor with over 13 years of experience helping women reconnect with their sensuality, feminine energy, and confidence through movement and breath. As a holistic wellness advocate, Addie is passionate about empowering women to embrace their true selves and lead fulfilling lives. Throughout her career, Addie has hosted and facilitated numerous movement workshops, vision board parties, providing women with powerful tools to create their best bodies and lives. She also creates beautiful handmade waistbands, which serve as a tangible reminder for women to stay connected to their bodies, goals, and intentions. In 2022, Addie faced a major personal loss when she became a widow. She has since aimed to transform her pain into a source of passion and purpose, openly sharing her grief story and offering valuable insight on grief and healing through online platforms. Addie has also authored two journals designated to help those who are grieving to express their feelings and find solace by transforming their emotions from head and heart to paper, as well as a vision board experience workbook. And you'll be able to see where you may contact Addie in the show notes. And that will be super helpful where you can find her on social media, uh, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and there'll be links where you can purchase her journals and her book, I believe right on Amazon. So I will give the clean confession that Addie is someone that I found on TikTok and reached out to her. And I believe that was from a post that you had on your 1 year mark of the passing of your husband, if I recall correctly.
Mhm. Yep. We were approaching 1 year, and it was around, we're just coming into the Thanksgiving holiday.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what is your husband's name?
Shavonde.
Shavonde. Am I saying it correctly? Okay, good. So
Everybody
how
knows, but his name
everybody
is
knows him as what?
Sean.
I can say Sean, whatever works. That's probably less likely for my tongue to slip. So I'm going to go with Sean, and then we don't have any uso. So how did you and Sean meet?
Okay, so my cousin, who ironically enough was widowed 4 months before me, uh, she was a flight attendant at the time. And she was flying into my city, and she calls me and she says, "Hey, I think I'm here." They were at a reserved Air Force base. So this base is non operational. I actually didn't even know that people flew into that base. It was so weird. And so I was like, oh, I said, yeah, you're right down the street. She says, oh,
So,
I'm at the,
so from somebody in the military, that's not weird. That's how we want to keep
oh,
it.
I'm, so commercial flight. So I guess it was just a layover before they went somewhere else, but they came in, she was going to stay overnight, and then they were going to head out the next day. And so I'm like, oh, well, I'm here. And she was like, come to the hotel. So I take the girls, my 2 daughters at the time, they were young, and we go and we meet her. We had a really fun time. I took the kids home the next day, and then she's like, I want to get some lunch. And I was like, okay, where do you want to go? Wherever you want to go. And she goes, and then she starts naming off all these places. And then we decided on a place. And at the very last minute, she changes her mind and she says, wait a minute, you guys have a Chili's? Because I have a coupon. And so I'm like, yeah, there's literally one, like, it's like right across the street. And so she goes, yeah, let's go there. So I'm like, okay, no problem. So we go to Chili's, we sit down at table 10, and we are waiting for our server to come over. And over comes this young man, and he asks us for our drink orders. And so he was really polite. Like, he had a really nice smile, and, he was working his thing. Like, he knew how to work tables for tips, let's put it that way. And so she tells me, oh, he's kind of cute. And she's like, what about him? And I'm thinking, what about him for what? Like, always trying to set somebody up,
Oh,
And
okay.
I was like, what about him? Like, no, thank you. She goes, I'm going to talk to him for you. And I'm like, please don't. And I get so embarrassed by that kind of stuff. It's like, I'm like, mm-mm. So the whole time now I'm on edge for the rest of the lunch, because I'm just wondering, at what point is she going to put me on blast? So,
Okay.
so sometime toward the end of our meal, he brings the check over, and then she goes, by the way, are you single? And he was like, yes, I am. And then the way he kind of looked a little hesitant, and she was like, because I want you to go on a date with my cousin. And I
Oh,
was like,
wow.
literally in my phone, fake texting to no one. Like, I cannot believe she just did this. I'm busy, right? And so he kind of looks over at me, and so I look up and I smile, and I'm just like, like, what do you say at that point? And so she puts my number on the check with all these little ridiculous hearts. And that was that. He said, I can't remember exactly what he said after that, but it was kind of like, okay, well, maybe I'll talk to you soon then, or something like that. And then we got up and we left. And as we're walking out, I'm like asking my cousin, I'm like, is he looking? And she's like, he's looking. And I was like, oh no. And so we ended up leaving. I'm like, I can't believe you did that to me, And so I think it was maybe the following day, he called, and we ended up talking on the phone for a couple of hours. And then the next day he called, and we were on the phone for like 8 hours. It was crazy. It was like high school on the phone all night. And then after that, we ended up going out on a first date, and the rest was history.
Oh, we gonna get into our history. Let's back up a little bit.
Okay.
Was this your first time ever fake texting?
No, of course
Okay.
not.
Because it sounded like you went to that with a default, like that was
With
your
the
jam.
default on the
Okay.
immediate. Like, if something is going on and I don't want to be a part of it, I am on the phone.
I need to pick that up. And isn't there something about the walk away, wanting to know if they're looking? What is it about that?
I wanted to know if he was looking at my booty.
And
And
obviously,
it was later confirmed.
oh, by Sean himself, that okay, of the walk away. Wow. So what year was this, and how were you when you met him?
This was 2013.
Okay.
This was in January. And I think I was 27.
Okay.
I might have been 27.
And how did you remember table 10?
So that kind of became a thing for us because he worked there. He knew the table numbers. And I don't remember when it ended up coming out, but one day we were telling our sides of the same story. And so
Okay.
he's sharing the story from his perspective. And that's one thing, Tina, like our meeting story, I loved when we were able to tell that story together because I had my side and then he had his side of it. And the way
Okay.
we were able to story tell that together, I wish we would have gotten that like on tape at some point.
Oh,
But
wow.
he let me know that that was table 10 because it wasn't originally his table that day. He was supposed to be serving a different section. And so when he saw us come in, he said, no, I'll take table 10. And so that just became a thing after that. And so even when we got married, we ended up trying to get our wedding date on the 10th because of table 10.
Oh, so he was checking your booty when you came in the door. It wasn't
Oh,
okay.
that's when inside.
Wow. At what point did he tell you that he intentionally took that table over? And how far into you guys connecting did you learn that?
It maybe probably was like a couple of months in when he shared like his perspective of the story. And so he
Okay.
kind of us when we first walked in and he was like, oh, I guess he thought that I was from out of town because he was like, he sees people come through that restaurant all the time. He had never seen me before. And he was like, she doesn't look like she's from around here. Like she looks different. And so he said that he told whoever it was, I'll get that table. And according to him, he was going to, if he said that if my cousin wouldn't have said anything at all, he was going to offer us a free dessert to try to break the ice to like say something. But he was like, nope, she did it for me. So I didn't even have to. So
Wow. It is amazing how one choice can change the direction of our life.
every,
One meeting, one table 10. When you look at your life, are there other moments that you feel like it was a one decision changed so much of your life? And if so, what does that look like for you?
yeah, probably all the time. You know, I feel like my family at some points in life used to say that I was impulsive. Like, you make these impulsive decisions. And I don't really so much think it's that. Like, if you know me, you know that I've probably put more thought into the decision than what it appears to be on the outside. But yes, I mean, even just me going to the army, you know, one decision that changed the trajectory of everything. Um,
Yes,
and it matters. Those decisions are like, and then it's a fork in the road. It's something totally different comes out of it.
it is. And thank you for mentioning the military and thank you for your service. What, I mean, I'm going to say some things and I want you to just, huh?
I said I tried.
But the
I gave
percentage of people, the percentage of people that never try, I give credit for that. So I'm going to say something and I want you to just share what comes to mind. MEPS Center.
Oh, goodness gracious. Trying to make sure that I was going to meet the weight requirement and sitting in the sauna all night, sitting in,
Really?
trying to make sure that that last little inch was going to be right.
Oh my gosh. Boot camp.
Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, the
Ooh,
stick.
and hot. And hot. What time of year were you there?
January, freezing cold. And I'm from California.
Ooh.
6 degrees when I got there. Six. Never seen anything like it in my life. I got pneumonia.
Oh, so you were on, so when I hear pneumonia in basic training, I don't hear rest. I hear like maybe indoor duty, but when somebody says pneumonia, they're thinking like, oh, you got to lay down for a week or two. Yeah, what really happened?
You know what? I started not feeling well. And I was telling them that I wasn't feeling good. Like, I feel like I have a fever and all this. Like, didn't nobody want to hear that at first. And then finally,
Zero.
they let me go to the infirmary and my fever was like 104 that day. And I was trying, like I was doing my best to try to just hang in there. I wasn't trying to be barked at and screamed at. And so I was really, but I couldn't do it. I'm like, I have to go. Like, I really don't feel good. So they let me go to sick call. And then the infirmary, it was 104. They were giving me Gatorade. And after a couple of hours of them not really being able to get my temperature down, they ended up keeping me in the infirmary. And so I actually ended up staying in there for 5 or 6 days. Um, and the company that I was originally supposed to go down to training with, they left. And so when I got back out of the infirmary, I ended up having to stay at like the in processing part of it all for like a whole nother month almost until the next group left out. So
You had to be recycled.
yes, I had to be recycled. And I'm happy at the way that all worked out. I loved my platoon that I ended up being a part of. Like I don't know, my battle buddy, like it was great. And so I can't say that it would have been the same, obviously, had I left beforehand, but just the whole point of it, like you don't think that you're going to get sick and like, everybody done left you and now so it
Right.
was, but no, there's no resting. The moment I came up out of that place, still weak, it was still duty to be done. I was a toilet cleaner in the barracks.
And it's interesting because if you had just been there a week before the other people came, it's like you knew so much more. It was only a week worth of information, but so much happens in that week that it's like you can kind of reposture yourself. Recycling seemed to work out better than having to just be deer in the headlights trying to figure it all out
Yeah,
because it is a lot. Do you have any connection still with anyone you met in the military?
I do. Thankfully, because of Facebook, there are quite a few of the girls from my platoon that we are still like, we don't talk all the time, but we're
Right.
still connected through Facebook. My battle, though, I've actually always kept in contact with her over social media. And so even on TikTok, she's always like right there in my comments and stuff. I love
Oh
that girl.
my gosh. Okay, cool. So how did you find social media and what did that look like for you?
Like in general, social
Mhm.
media, I guess because I'm a millennial. MySpace was how I found social media or the chat rooms first. It started with the chat rooms. I used to be a
Okay.
chat bully, and it
Oh,
was a way that I feel like I could express myself because I was behind the wall, right? And which is what trolls do, right? You're behind the wall, so you feel like you can say whatever you want. And as a young teenager who was just getting onto the internet, oh, I was in there, right? But
okay.
MySpace was the first social platform I think that I really like took to. I loved MySpace, and Facebook at that time was only, I think, for college students. Like if you didn't have a college email address, like you couldn't even have a Facebook. And so at some point that ended up opening up to everybody. And I remember jumping on Facebook, and then the Instagram came along. That one was my favorite because it was just pictures and I really enjoy taking pictures. Um, and then 9 years ago, I ended up starting a YouTube channel, and I became this vlogger out of nowhere. And sometimes I'd be in the streets in my city and people would go, "We saw your vlog." And my kids' friends used to think I was so cool because I was on the internet. And so I've kind of always just been floating in the interspace.
I mean, so you're like YouTube famous and it's like your kids. It's one thing when your children, but it's like that's my mom. It's like, what are you doing on there?
Yeah.
Have your children looked at your social content?
Um, so when they were younger, no. Like a lot of, I mean, they weren't allowed on the internet like that really anyways. And then the babies were really little. Like I started the YouTube channel to document my pregnancy. And so we had announced that we were pregnant, and then every week I would go on and do these pregnancy videos, and that sort of ended up spiraling into kind of like a family vlog channel.
Okay.
I would motivational cleaning videos. And then we were all working on something in the house. Well, that man used to get so mad because every paycheck I was like, "So can we go to Home Depot?" Because it was something that I was going to do. But I did a lot of DIY
Okay.
stuff. kids didn't really watch back then. Only every now and again when they were in the videos, they would want to see like their part of the video.
Right.
Cousins would always be like, I saw you on YouTube. So they would want to see what the cousins were looking at. But I never really felt like my YouTube channel either was, made specific for like tiny people. Like it was my life, but
Right.
because they were on it, people would watch it too because it was relatable in some sense with the kids. But my older girls, they're on my social medias now. They don't really comment or pay attention because my daughter goes, Mom, you're on my FYP again. She's like, you're taking over all the socials. And I'm just like,
Mama doing what mama do.
yeah. Sorry, kid.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm gonna jump back into the story with Sean. So you guys dated for how long, and what did proposing look like?
So how long did we date? 13, 14. We dated for a year and a half.
Okay.
So first things first.
Ooh, sound like tea. Come on.
Yeah, let me spill it. He was a man who was very like, I guess, like old school or traditional in the sense. Now he was 9 years older than me. So
okay.
we had, there was that difference there. But we ended up I took him up a mountain in Palm Springs and we went hiking in the snow that March. So we met in January. In March, we went up the mountain. And on our date up the mountain, he had pulled me aside. We were up on this hill looking over like the whole, just everything. We're really high up. And he says, I would like to know if you would be my girlfriend. And I thought that it was so cute because I was like, do people still do that? Like a lot of times you date and then like we're together. But no, he very specifically wanted to be sure that he asked me to be his girlfriend. So we officially, I guess, began our dating relationship that March. My brother passed away in July. So no more than like 7 months after I met this man, like tragedy struck me. And so he was kind of there through all of that. And that was really special for me. And then the following year in 14, at the beginning of the year sometime, we found out we were pregnant. And it was like, so we did that together. I ended up going on bed rest. My son wanted to come out early for some reason. So on my birthday that year in 2014, my water broke. I was out with my friend. She took me we were getting our nails done and I'm in the pedicure seat and I go to the bathroom and I'm like, I think I'm leaking. And so the whole time I'm getting this pedicure, I'm like, and I didn't want to cause a panic, but I'm like, something's not right. So we end up going to the hospital. They were trying to say, no, it isn't that. And then like more. So it was like, let's do I guess it's called a Fern test. And they says, oh, no, you're definitely leaking fluid. We're going to have to keep you here until you deliver. Huh? Like I go from having lunch to like until I delivered. The boy was not due until January. Like, what do you mean I have to stay?
Ooh, wow.
So this was the 12th of November. And they were like, well, we'll have to monitor everything. Obviously, if at any signs of the baby being in distress or any signs of infection, they would end up having to deliver early. And so I was just in there on bed rest by myself. Like he had to step up and take care of my other two kids that were at home. Like it really changed a lot of things. But my son ended up being born December 1st. So only a couple of weeks. I was there for about 3 weeks almost, and then a week and a half after. And so when I came home, he was still in NICU. So it was a really tough transition from having to go back and forth to the hospital. So one night on the couch, I was at home, I was sitting down, our son was in NICU, and I was watching something on TV. And so he comes over and he like kneels down in front of me and he was just like hugging my legs. And like, I didn't think anything of it at first. And then he's like, I really, really love you. You know that. And I was like, yeah. And so here I'm thinking, I'm like, what is it about to say? Like, I'm thinking, is he about to like dump me or something? Like, what perfect timing can it get any worse? Um, and he says his spiel. I cannot remember, like, obviously word for word, but it was really sweet. I can remember what I felt like in the moment. It was really
Okay.
sweet. And he was just like, I just want to know, he was like, oh, I also have your stuff. Now, from being in the hospital, all of my jewelry, everything was off because I had to have a C-section. So I
Mm.
hadn't put it back on yet. And he was like, oh, I have your ring anyways. And he was like, I wanted to put your ring back on because he had given me like a promise ring. I don't know, a while back before that.
Okay.
So he puts this different ring on, and I looked down and I looked and I went, because it wasn't my ring. And he's like, will you be my wife? And I was like, yes, like, and so he kind of did a switcheroo with the rings. And
Nice.
yeah, so it was really sweet. And I guess he had asked my friend at some point, because that girl, she can keep a secret. I tell you, that's scary. But
Note to self, good, bad, but
no,
you need to.
but I guess he asked her, like, is it lame, like, for me to do it like in the hospital? Like, because, and so, but he ended up waiting until I was at home. And so he proposed
Wow.
in the room. Well, while I looked a whole hot mess sitting
You
on the
know,
couch.
there's something after somebody watching you give birth, it changes the game a little bit. There are the level of commitment and just the growth of love. And challenging times are difficult in relationships, but they're also opportunities to grow. They
I
can
agree.
bring you to closer together, or they can tell you apart. Depends on how you handle them.
Yes.
So your son comes home safely
So after
eventually?
42 long days of back and forth in the NICU, 6 weeks, and yes, he
Mhm.
finally came home, and it was all good.
Thank you. I want to circle back to your brother. Your brother's name?
Dimitri.
Dimitri. Was that your first experience with grief very close to you? What was?
Nope. So don't laugh, but my first close experience with grief in real life was a hamster I had named Sugar when I was like 8 years old.
That is okay, so let's pause. That is such a crucial moment when you lose a pet because at 8 years old, for most people, the idea that we don't stay forever is not something that we've had to address.
Right. At all.
So it's a moment where it can be devastating because a child can go from, if the pet dies, what does that mean about my parents? What does that mean about me? What does that mean about the world? And that becomes the way that's handled
Mhm.
really dictates the way a lot of different things go on. And a child can feel very traumatic. I mean, you can have a whole family when the dog passes and everybody's been together and it changes the night. So I'm
Yep.
not laughing, and it's relevant.
Um, so yeah, it was my hamster. But as far as a person, when I was 13, 14, eighth grade, I guess, um, I liked a boy. And after him liking everybody in the school before me, he finally wanted to be my boyfriend. We ended up dating for 2 years after that. I don't even think I was allowed to have a boyfriend, so let my mom tell it we weren't dating. But I loved him. That was my first little, for the capacity that you can feel at the time,
Okay.
puppy or not. That's what it was. Um, and so that was 13, 14. Obviously, we broke up, but we remained friends. Even after I had like my first daughter, he would still come around and pop in and check on me. Like, we were always really cool. When I was 22 and he was just before his 23rd birthday, about 10 days, about a week before his 23rd birthday, I got a phone call that he had been shot out of state. And
Mm,
it sucked everything out of me. It was it was really weird. It was really weird.
Grief is weird. Thank you for sharing that. So you've had that experience with your friend. How did that experience differ with your brother passing?
I feel like the initial shock of learning that someone has passed away is probably very, very similar, right? Like when I found out about Brian, it was shell shocking, right? And for months I was really, really sad. And it was almost like, why am I so sad? Like, like we dated when we were kids or whatever. And but it's like, but I was really, really sad about that for a while. I remember I would drive around and I would play the same stupid songs in my car
Mm,
over and over and over again, and they would make me cry, and I would sit there and torture myself in that way, because just turn the song off. But no, I would play them and drive and cry. When my niece knocked on my door the morning that my brother died, she knocked on my door and she says, Grandpa just called, which was my dad, and she said, my dad died. And it was almost like I was like, come again? I said, huh? And she goes, Grandpa just called. My dad died. And again, that very same, it's almost ghostly. Like everything leaves, numbness. And she just fell into my arms, and I was, for her, it was like, but I was on the inside was just like, what? I don't understand. We just saw him 2 days ago on the 4th of July.
mm,
Think about the events that surround, like, leading up to a death. Sometimes it's almost surreal the way that things happen, because we hadn't seen him for, he didn't always come around like that as adults. My brother, he was into some wild stuff. So,
okay.
he didn't always come around. But this particular year on the 4th of July, he had came over to the family barbecue. We had such a great time. And even when he left, he rode motorcycles. My mom hated that. But even when he left, we said goodbye. And I remember very vividly, we watched him back that motorcycle out of the driveway. And for some reason, it's like we're all standing around the driveway. We watched him drive all the way down the street, turn the corner, and then listen to the motorcycle leave and go all the way down. And it was like, who knew? Like we were watching him ride off into the sunset. But
Literally.
I was, that one, was where you don't, not that you think that your friends are going to die, right? Like, because you don't think that either. Like your friends are your age, like we're supposed to live until we're old. And then, but your siblings, like siblings aren't supposed to die. Our siblings, they're going to be there with us forever.
Right.
And that actually turned my life like in a completely different, that one was very different.
Thank you. I did not want you to mention that and us not give some space for that. Thank you for sharing that. Um, so Sean's on his knees, he proposes, you say yes. Did you guys elope? Was there a wedding, family and friends? What type of ceremony
Oh,
did you have?
wedding. So I had been married before.
Oh,
I had married when I was 19, just before I had went to the army. And we were too young, too dumb. And so we went to Vegas, and it was very quick because I was leaving. And benefit. So I needed a husband on the paper for the BAH and all the things.
oh my gosh.
And
Okay,
so
yes.
it was very quick and it just was. That man did not get down on one knee and confess his love and beg me to marry him and all of that stuff. It was kind of just like, his mom was like, why don't you guys get married? And I go, your mom said we can get married. Do you want to? And then we went and got a ring, and that was that. So yes, I
Yes.
didn't a wedding, right? We got married in Vegas the first time. It was just a few people that were there. My dad wasn't even there. He was probably like, what on earth are you doing? So with Sean, we went and looked at different places, and we planned this wedding. I planned a wedding. I had my big binder and I snapped into wedding planner mode and
Oh,
queen DIY with, I learned how to make coffee filter flowers, and Pinterest became my best friend. And um I did that.
okay. I had a binder, but no, yeah, that other stuff. I'm like,
The wedding
no.
was beautiful, and I feel like I did that. And for the most part with minimal help, like we did it and we paid for it. And when I look back at that, I'm like, dang, like we paid for it. And it, I mean, it wasn't one of those big old $100,000 weddings, but I mean, we did that. And it
Wow.
turned beautiful. We got married at Brand Park in Southern California at it's like a little tea garden, almost a Japanese tea garden under a willow tree. And so
Oh, wow. What do you think when you look back at the pictures or the photos of the wedding?
life just changes over time. um it was beautiful, and it's like happy memories when I look at that. I feel like when I look at those pictures of the wedding, like, marriage is hard,
Mm,
and sometimes you can really grow sick of a person, I mean,
okay.
you get into your ways sometimes. But I look at those photos and I always just feel like that was a very genuine, happy time, and we cannot take anything away from that.
We cannot. You said marriage is hard. If you had an opportunity to talk to Addie the day before that wedding, what would you tell her based on what you know now?
Marriage isn't the wedding.
Mm,
It's not just the wedding. You think that the wedding was hard. And I think somewhere along the way, I learned statistically that like planning a wedding is one of the like number one most stressful things that we do in planning anyway. It's not that. It's everything that comes after that. And it is a we. It is not an I. It is not always you. And it ain't going to always be about him. Like you two are going to need to be really serious and really diligent and communicate all
okay.
the time. So
Mm, thank you. You said marriage was hard. What does that mean for you, for your experience with marriage? To Sean.
um like marriage is work. Like maybe hard isn't the right word, but sometimes work can feel like work. I think that sometimes we can get these thoughts that, you get married and things are just supposed to be. Marriage is building, and you're
Mm,
building a nation. And I mean, when people are out there working away at putting up structures, like that's work. And sometimes that work can be hard. You're building something together. You're bringing two lives, two people, two backgrounds.
hmm.
Um, again, and again, he's older than me, so I mean, there were backgrounds that we
Right.
were together. Um, and you have to build that. It isn't always just rainbows. There's learning a lot about yourself and about another person. And I
Hmm.
mean, if we can call that shadow work if we want to, but even that,
Hmm.
that's a tough space to be in. You
Right.
learn yourself through somebody else. So so yeah, so it can be hard to build sometimes with
Okay.
another, I think maybe is
Thank
what I
you. You
mean.
make a solid point. People can often be caught up in the act of this ceremony
Yeah,
besides the work of maintaining this relationship.
right.
And that is where the heavy lifting begins, to be able to know these two people from different backgrounds, different upbringings. You mentioned something, communication is so key. And that's not just making sure I told you I love you every day. It's knowing that when I am not your biggest fan because you have done something I didn't like, to be able to articulate that in a way that defines how I feel, but not putting you down. and
Yes,
encourage you. This one thing doesn't strike down all the other wonderful things you've done. It's just that this thing has me feeling some kind of way, and I don't want to stay in my field. So I need to be able to articulate. But if you have never been in a space where you were given permission to speak openly and to share, it can be difficult because we're going to get on each other's nerves when you are in close proximity of somebody else.
exactly. Exactly. And so healthy communication and respect is really important. And I think in the moment, sometimes like we don't like if you're not intentionally
Mm,
practicing that type of communication together, it can be lost in the sauce, and I'm not the type of person that is like I'm always, like some women are always popping off, like I'm not the pop off queen. I'm was more or less like the it's bothering me and I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to cause any issues and I don't want to cause
mm,
and so I think when we do that, that also isn't healthy because it's not expressing those things. And how else is someone supposed to know anything if you're not expressing something? And so therefore you got one person who's oblivious and another person who's resentful, and you can't meet in the middle because nobody knows what's going on. So
that is so true. What are some things about your marriage that most people didn't know, that you may have shared already on social media, but while you were in the marriage, people didn't know about it?
we were goofballs.
Okay.
Like maybe like outside, like we looked really serious, especially in his family, for instance. I think they saw power couple. I think our pictures on social media gave ooh black love, and it
Um,
was. But I'm like, we were just a bunch of just silly, like for him, I always it was a point in the beginning when I was asking my friends, I'm like, he's handsome and there's this and there's that. I was like, but my hang up was our age gap.
oh,
And
okay.
he would always tell me, like, who cares? Like, what difference does it? But it was like, I never like felt it
Okay.
in the relationship because of who he was. It was like he was just like me, kind of. So and we were gossips. Ooh, we would gossip.
Oh, okay.
He talked. Like I feel like if that's one thing, he was my buddy, like
Okay.
he talked and I talked. And so it was like, we had tea all the time for each
Nice. Nice. That is cool to be able to enjoy that type of banter with someone that you spend your life with.
for sure.
Unfortunately, you are in the widowhood because you're in the widowhood. Uh, I want you, if you're so willing to share whatever you want as far as what led up to Sean no longer being in this world, what that transition looked like. I don't want to ask you a lot of questions along the way. I'd rather give you space to share that how you feel comfortable.
So I will preface this with it's really hard to know that someone passed away and you not really have clarity
Mm,
around how how. So leading up to all of this, him and I, we had been in a little bit of a rocky place within the marriage. Um, and that's not to take away from 9 years of doing life together. But we had just kind of reached a point, and I giggle now in hindsight because, 7 years, that's one of those spaces that, there's a hurdle there at 7 years in marriages, I hear. but,
hmm.
um,
Okay.
but we were going through our own struggles at that point. Um, and I don't know if due to stress or what, but he had ended up having like a few seizures that year.
Mm.
Back in 2018 was the first one ever that I know of, that I was there for, present for. And I didn't know at the time what happened. We were on a cruise. He was in sales, and I had manifested this cruise that I'm always going to say I manifested that cruise. I put a cruise up on my vision board, didn't know how we were going to take it or do it, especially not with little babies,
Mm-hmm.
But it was up there. And then his company ended up running a competition. And so the top three or top five sales guys that came in their little competition were going to win a all expenses paid 7-day cruise. And I remember feeling like, that's my cruise. And he did it. He got second in the competition. And so we were packing our bags, and on my 33rd birthday, I woke up in Cabo on a boat, and it was amazing. But also on that trip one night in the middle of the morning, like he had made a really loud noise, and then I heard a thud, and I was like, huh? And it woke me up, but he was on the floor on the side of the bed. And, on a cruise ship, there's not very much room to get around a cruise ship. So he was on the floor, like right up next to the wall, but he was like shaking kind of,
Mm.
breathing really funny. And I wasn't really sure what was going on, but he was kind of like incoherent. I'm calling his name, and I'm kind of like tapping him, and his eyes were open, but he's not like responsive to me. I had no idea what was going on. So I end up calling the ship 911 for emergency. They ended up coming up with a wheelchair. By the time they had gotten there and helped get him up and into the wheelchair, it was like everything was back. He's like, where are we going? Like, why am I in this chair? What's going on? And I'm trying to explain to him like what had happened. And he's like, I'm fine. And so we go down to the ship infirmary. They look at a couple of things. He had ended up getting a lot of really splotchy, like red spots on his chest. They really couldn't explain what any of it was. And then they kind of just sent us on our way. He said his legs felt weak that next day for the next couple of days. And I had no clue. Like you couldn't tell me that was a seizure at that time. I had no idea. So a few years later in 2020, it happened again at home. We called the ambulance. They ended up coming. By the time they got there, they start asking him a bunch of questions. He's kind of lethargically answering them, but he's always really like mean with the EMTs, right? And what is all this stuff on me? And what are we doing? And like macho with this attitude, but it's like, you passed out or something. Like, so they take him again, hospital. This time it changes his life. They took his license away, because if you are have an episode of unconsciousness, like unless you're cleared from your doctor, they will revoke your license and stuff, but still no explanation. They did CAT scans, they did all this stuff. Nobody's able to tell us anything. So, okay. Come 2022, I had left, me and the kids, we came for spring break to my parents' house for a week. The day that we got back, he picked us up from the bus. We did like the Greyhound or whatever. So from Vegas to Cali, the Greyhound I like to ride the Greyhound because it's easy, it's clean, and it's a straight shot through. He picked us up, and on the way home, he's asking me something, and I'm trying to ask him questions, and he kept forgetting what he was trying to say. And he's like, I can't think of the name. He's like, and he's like having an issue trying to think of whatever it is that he was trying to say. And we get out of the car, we make it home, we get out of the car, we start bringing our luggage in. He tells me, oh no, I'll get your suitcase. He goes inside, or I go inside. He goes back out to get my suitcase. And all of a sudden I'm like, why is he not back inside of the house yet? Like, what is taking so long? I go outside, and he's down on the ground convulsing. And so he had fallen over the suitcase onto the ground. We had a brick pathway. So I tell my daughter to get something for the back of his head, and a construction worker happened to see what happened from across the street and ran over, like, would you like me to call the ambulance and stuff or whatever? They came. He starts to come to. Once again, he's wondering why he's all strapped up. And I just looked at him and I said, it happened again. So I'm in the hospital now at this point. We need to know what's going on because this is now becoming unacceptable. Like, I've read that if you've had 3 or more seizures within a specific time frame, that it's considered epileptic. What are tests that we can run to figure out anything that's going on here? Because this can't keep happening. Like, he has a career, he has children. Like, this is scary and it's not safe. Um, and they were just like, if they are seizures, when it comes to seizures, there is no determining of that. We can't, we can test after, but really there's nothing, there is no known cause for a seizure. Evidently, anyone can have a seizure at any time for any reason. And they said that stress could cause, it too. So now I'm troubled because I'm like, okay, well, we're having our own problems. Like, somehow, like, I'm stressing him out that much that he's having me, like, and so that was not a really good space for me to be in either. But clearly, this keeps happening to him. Well, he had another episode after that at a customer's house. The customer called me, let me know that they had called, that he was at the hospital. And again, no answers. They ran every test. They did a CAT scan. They did EKGs. They did brain scans. They kept him overnight for 3 days, clean as a whistle. You're healthy, 46-year-old male. What's going on? Like, what is this? And so he came out for my birthday because I was at my parents' at this time. And he came out for my birthday. He spent my birthday with us. Him and the kids went and got me gifts. We all went out to Olive Garden. The next morning, he says, "Can I come and do school with you guys?" And so I was like, "Yeah, sure." And because I homeschool, and so he came and we went to the library. We all went to breakfast. He did the whole school day with us, and then we all went to the park. The kids were able to show him their tennis, and they played. And he was like, "All right, I got to get back to the airport. Like, my flight leaves at whatever time." And that was on a Monday, and he left. That Thursday, we get on the phone. We're talking about Christmas. What are we going to get the kids? He's on Amazon ordering up our daughter this dollhouse that he saw. He's like, "I'll ship it to you, and then I'll come and put it all together." And we were on the phone for a long time that day. And ironically enough, that weekend of my birthday, his grandmother had passed away about a week before that. And so he got to see all of his family the weekend that he was here for my birthday, because they had all gotten together to, meet up about their grandma. So it was like he made all these rounds and saw people that he hadn't seen. And that Thursday, we had been on the phone for hours. And then I was like, "All right, well, I'm about to leave the library. It's like 3:30. I gotta go." Like, I've been on the phone with you since 10 o'clock this morning. And he was like, "All right, well, I got to see if I have to go to work, blah, 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 whatever. I'll talk to you tomorrow." All right, talk to you tomorrow. Bye. And then tomorrow didn't come. At 5 o'clock in the morning, around 5 something in the morning, I got a phone call from his sister's best friend. They live right across the street from one another. And I didn't answer the phone the first time. I don't know what I was doing. I didn't answer. It was early in the morning. Like, why is she calling me? But then she called back, right? She called back, and I didn't stop to think like, oh, it's some kind of emergency. To me, it was like, what the heck? Like, that was a butt dial for sure. Like, she calls back. So I answer, and she's like, "I'm really sorry to tell you this, but Shavonde passed away." And I was like, "What?" I was like, I said, "Huh?" And she's like, "Shavonde passed away, Addie. I'm sorry." And I was like, "Wait a minute." Like, I was like, "Who told you that? Like, what are you talking about? Like, how do you know this?" And so then, and it was weird because I was giggling, and it was, wasn't funny. Like, I was giggling, like, "Girl, what the hell are you talking about? Like, get off of, why are y'all calling me on the phone like this in the morning? What are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense." And then she said that they were going to head up to Vegas, and did she want me to come and pick her up and pick me up, that she'd be there in about 20 minutes. And so I said, yeah. And I hung up the phone, and I was really confused. It was like, number one, I was sleeping, then I woke up. Two, I was just on the phone with you all day yesterday. You were fine. You were fine yesterday. And I was just confused. I felt out of it. I felt out of my mind. And I went to go and tell my parents. And I mean, I don't know how to tell anybody that someone's dead. I've never had to say those words to anybody before. And I just sat down in the middle of their floor and I said, Siobhan's dead. And I can remember I was rocking back and forth. I was rocking myself. And ironically enough, they didn't have much to say. Their comfort was very minimal. My mom tried to come over and, I guess, see what was going on and stuff. And I just said, somebody's coming to pick me up, and I'm going up the hill. And I said, and I'm not sure when I'll be back. And I was like, please don't tell the kids yet. I don't know what's going on. And I came back in my room, and I went in the bathroom, and I fell apart. And so that was the news on the early morning of November 18th.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I know sometimes it's something we can rattle off. Sometimes it sucker punches us. Sometimes it just sticks in our throat. So I don't take it lightly when people take time to share their journey. And we know in sharing our journey can help encourage someone else, but it costs to do that. It does cost. And I want to ask, now this is the third person to leave this world. How does Sean's departure from this world look different from your brother and from your friend?
His departure felt really different because even though, like, okay, so when Brian died, like when my hamster died, I was devastated. When Brian passed away, I was also devastated. Of course, my brother is my sibling. I love him. That's my brother. But something about this loss, like it took me to much differently than the sibling loss. And my heart had to hurt for so many more people in this one because I have 4 children. So it's like, whoa. On top of that, it was like he started saying, so he said he was having these weird feelings. And he had broke down to me like a couple of weeks before and was like, I don't know, I'm feeling really weird. It's like waking me up out of my sleep. And I don't know who or what, but I feel like death. And I don't know how to take that because I'm like, you say you don't know what or who, and I'm like, is it me? Like,
because we always go, what did I do? And it oftentimes has nothing to do with us, but since we're in such a close proximity, that is such a default.
And so he says, and so then as he's having these feelings, his brother suffered a stroke. So then he thought, wow, like, is my brother gonna die? Shortly after that, his grandma. So I remember telling him, I said, "Woo, you give me chills." I said, "Cause you said it, like you said you were feeling some kind of way." And I never asked after his grandma passed away, did he still feel like that?
Mm.
And so I always wonder, like, was he feeling that for himself? And he started saying, I'll love you. Like he'll say, we would get off the phone or whatever. He would say, I love you until I can't. I'll love you until I can't. I have text messages. I love you until I can't. What is that?
Girl, I'm over here like,
Until you can't?
so you can't breathe? What do you mean? Because I don't understand what.
Till you, where is this coming from? Right.
Right.
And so it's not to say that like there was anticipation, but like he was having these weird seizures and then he's calling me saying weird stuff. I was already scared for him.
Right.
And so it was just so confusing. And then we get down there to the hospital, and that was just a joke. They weren't telling me anything. And when we got there, they said that he was already gone. They had already sent him out of the. How? When we told you we were on our way and that we were coming from California, that we would be there, we flew down the freeway that morning. We got there in less than 3.5 hours. And you've already removed him from the hospital and sent him to a mortuary with no consent from anyone. And now no one in this hospital is able to tell me what's going on or what happened. You're telling me that I need to request medical records? I was furious.
It just adds to it.
And it just started, yeah. And so it was piling on. And then they that we did not qualify or something for an autopsy because they worked on him at the hospital. So everything surrounding this was confusing and unclear. And it just added to all of it because here I am. I'm having to now jump into this mode of business almost right away.
That part.
And I don't even know I can't even say what done happened to this man with surety.
There are so many pieces to that, Addie. And I want to circle back to something you mentioned, if you'll allow me. You mentioned that you were living with your parents. So whatever difficulties you guys were having had caused you to leave the marital home. And so friends or family people may know that. Then he passes. And you and I have talked on TikTok and had lives and TikTok lives, not lives living together, but a conversation where grief is complicated. It does not take away from one's grief. I would want you, if you would, speak to the person, their spouse has passed and the marriage was not in a good place and they don't feel like they have the right to grieve.
So at his memorial, someone said to me, I didn't know you guys were separated. And I just smiled. But my first thought initially inside was, how is that relevant? You're separated. I don't hate him because we were separated. I talk to him every single day. And I did not expect that in possibility of ending a marriage, that a whole life would be taken out. That's totally different. And it reminds me of people that speak to, oh, I understand because I've been divorced before. We were gonna co-parent. We were co-parenting. He was here every weekend. He was on the phone with his kids almost every night. We were on the phone almost every day. Like, who knows what possibilities would have happened down the road. Marriages go through their waves all the time. I know people that have been married and divorced to get right back married to the same individual.
Yes.
The life isn't lost because the line of communication is still open, because reconciliation is always still a possibility when a person is alive. All of that got taken in an instant. And so to the person who may not have been in the best place in their marriage, because we aren't always, there are people who you get up in the morning, you had a issue the night before, you get up in the morning and it's like, you might not even say goodbye to each other that morning, just because there's times when we can be irritated with each other. You don't expect the person to go out and never come back. It's different and it hits different. And we are very much allowed to grieve. I was just on the phone with him the day before. It doesn't stop the relationship. And in this case, it wasn't. And you know what? And I won't even say that, because even if it was, it doesn't matter what was happening at the time, because there's still a life. Someone made a statement to me once that no matter what state it was in when that man passed, it doesn't erase 9 years of history. It doesn't erase 8 years of happiness. It doesn't erase 2 children. It doesn't erase the days, weeks, and months and years of memories. It don't erase the home that we built. It doesn't erase what we poured in. You have friends that you may fall off with or that you don't speak to for a long time. That's a separation. As someone who you might have not there, I saw people at the memorial. He hasn't seen you in years. That was a separation. You weren't really talking or communicating for a long period of time. That didn't stop you from being here to grieve. That didn't stop you from being here to show your respects. That didn't stop you from feeling sad about all the memories of what it was. For people like me, we grieved twice, because there was the grieving of the initial, what we thought the relationship was, and that already felt like it was breaking down. And then you died.
How? Just disrespectful. Disrespectful.
Disrespectful. And then you were just like, no, I'm not going to do any of it. And you just left. The disrespect.
The dark humor in the grief community is phenomenal.
Because if I didn't have it, honey, I don't even know. It just, you have to. On Father's Day, I giggled, and forgive me, but me and my girls were driving, my older girls, my daughter's 19. And I told her, I says, today I identify as a father. I says, because one of my baby daddies is a deadbeat and the other one is just dead. And we just cracked up laughing. And it's like, you only get it if you get it.
You do. And it's a game changer. It is a game changer, because I'll say, for the grief community that I interact with, whether it's on TikTok or Instagram, whatever social media platform, having that community gives you a space where you don't have to explain or validate your position. You can just be and know that there's somebody in that community that will get it.
And I realized just how important that was until you get in it, and until you meet those other people that are able to be right there in it with you.
How did you start meeting people in community, or feel like you started getting in, and what did that look like for you? Okay.
So I had already started sharing what was going on, because as a YouTube blogger, I had subscribers that have watched our family for years,
Okay.
invested. And so when he passed away, first of all, when you think that people are not watching your social media, your subscribers, they're watching. They notice everything. They notice the subtle things. They notice all the things. So I had already had people DMing me like, oh, I noticed you weren't in Las Vegas anymore in your last few vlogs. Oh, I noticed you didn't have your wedding ring on in your last vlog. Oh, I know. They notice. How is he gonna die and I'm just not gonna come back? And I plan to vlog again. This is a part of what I do. I enjoy vlogging. I really enjoy the creative artistry of vlogging. That's what I like to do. I am a videographer. How am I just gonna come back to the vlog living life? Nothing ever happened. I have to address this with the people, like I'm somebody, right? Like I have to address
People
this.
need to know.
People have to know. So I shared that initial vlog, and then I was filming just the whole process of this all. Like I would set up my camera, and when I cleaned out that house, I filmed it. When I got that moving truck and we came back across states, I filmed it. When we got the urn, I filmed it, because that was my outlet. I was talking really to my camera in a room by myself, but I was talking to my internet friends. And granted, on YouTube, it's a different community than on TikTok. You get comments and you get people, and I have my good and faithfuls that have been around for a long time. But when I took those very same videos and brought them to TikTok in a way, in a reflective way, like here I have all this footage of me just sitting here crying, which probably seems odd. Like, why are you just recording yourself crying? I love the people that are like, why are you crying on the internet? Because I am.
And she did.
And I did, and I still do. But being able to go back in a reflective way with those videos and talk about them in a space where people were very responsive to it, right? The comments were there, the views were there, like other people with the same situations or similar understandings, they were there. And so it felt very community like. And you had a lot to do with that. I mean, the first time I ever sat with anybody else grieving anything was when you held space for us on Thanksgiving last year. And I joined that Zoom, and I very intentionally knew that I was going to do. The moment I saw the link, I said, I'm going to hop on. I don't even know who the hell these people are, but like I'm going to be there, because I was at an Airbnb by myself with my family because I didn't want to be anywhere else. We had a whole family that came over to my mom and dad's house, and I felt thrown into that because I live here. I didn't have a choice to say, oh no, I don't feel like it this year. That wasn't my choice. And because you all are having company, I'm going to excuse myself because I don't feel like being surrounded by this company. And I got an Airbnb, and I was surrounded by you all's company that morning. And it was to just be in the presence of other people who feel what you feel or similar. I mean, we're all different, but
Wow.
it's comfort that I mean, I don't know, maybe it can't be explained. It's a comfort.
Thank you for sharing that. And community is underrated as far as how important it is. For someone such as yourself, you have been communicating via messages, but now actually interacting with people. And I have seen how you have become more engaged, more directly having conversations, jumping in alive, obviously doing your own work for yourself. But do you think being in community, or let me say this, how does being in community impact your grief?
It's helpful. Talk therapy is really powerful, and everybody can't afford a therapist. Everybody's not going to go to a therapist. And I'm not knocking therapy, because by all means, the grief space is something that for a lot of people does and will require a licensed therapist to help them through that.
And it could
How,
just be an economic scenario. Somebody may want to go, but may not have the means to go. And I am team mental health and a therapist, a coach, or somebody, because you're in uncharted territory. So that's a given.
exactly. And then on top of that, not all therapists are going to genuinely understand your grief. And so that's where I think I am with it. Like, I'm team mental health. I have also kind of always been that, like, I'm going to DIY this too. I'm not
Well,
always in a position where therapy has been an option. I haven't always had the insurances that cover therapy or
Right.
the fund cover something like that. And so, but I am the type of person that has always uh, worked on self improvement in whatever way that I can. And so, you asked me before about my brother's death, and that was very impactful because when he died, the one thing that I can recall that he said to me was, live your life because you can, and stop living your life for other people. My brother was on drugs. He had a
Mm.
long with being an addict and was in and out of NA, and it caused a lot of stress within the
Right.
family. In a sense, I didn't always see him a lot because, as the black sheep, you stay away.
Right.
But he always hung out with me. He always would,
Mm.
whether he went home and stopped by mom's or not, he would come and see me, because I'm not going to be doing all this. Like, I feel you, like they think I'm weird too. But he said, live your life because you can. And so when he passed away, I feel like that was a spiritual awakening. There
Okay.
was emergence because I wanted to know what was up. At that point, all the questions, the very deep, the very hard questions would come up for me. And I'm a question kind of girl. I love journals, and I love the idea of questions, because when a question is asked, our brain is going to work to formulate an answer. And as you formulate those answers and you hear yourself, or you write this stuff down, or you speak these things out, more and more and more, you can get clear on your answers. And so when he passed away, I hosted my first vision board party that year. He died in July. In December, I was like, if I'm changing my life, everybody that I know is changing their life right along with me. And I had done this work, and I had been listening to these self-helps, and I needed to know, why are we here? What does purpose mean? What is a purpose? How do we get to that? Because life cannot just be this. We are not just here to live, and in his case, what some people would consider a screwed up life, only to just die and have nothing and be nothing. There's no way. And so that one vision board party changed everything. I started doing these envision life uh parties, and anybody that wanted to host one, I was like, do you guys want to do a vision board party? I started asking on Facebook for magazine donations, and I had people who would drop magazines off at my door. And for 8 years, 7 years, I would do one every year, outside of if people wanted me to come and host one for them or for their families or for their kids. But for myself, every year in December, like, my friends and the people around me knew that they could look forward to, she's going to have that. Yes. 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 And I love that it's right there out in the open where you can see it and have it at the forefront all the time. And
You do
that
see how big that thing is. Like, that's the bad science project. Like
one of those
that.
posters. I love it. I love it because it's so important. It's so important. And that became such an important work for me. And so that being said, I've always been about just like, it can't break me. I can't let it break me. So what do I have to do? And so the being in community is helpful, because talking about things helps, and talking about things with people who understand helps. I watched my brother. I used to drop him off. He'd get on my nerves because he couldn't drive no vehicle and stuff. And he would always be, Addie, can you take me to my meeting? Addie, I need you to take me to my meeting. And then my mom would be like, can you take your brother to be like, why can't you take him? He used to get on my nerves, but I would get him to those meetings. And even with that, when you're struggling with something, being in that community is important. They share a lot in those NA and AA meetings. They're very impactful. When I was standing for my first marriage after it fell apart, you know, group counsel, like I found a ministry that I became a part of, Faith and Marriage Ministries, and it was being around that group of people that were also experiencing similar circumstances that we can, we can vibe here, and we're lifting each other up. They say that misery loves company, but positive company is company. And so we might be in misery, but empowering company is really good company. And so community becomes so important because of the sharing. It's the sharing that brings validation and a feeling of less loneliness at a time where you feel probably the most alone.
Wow, thank you. That is so powerful. You
Yeah.
mentioned about not allowing yourself to get stuck and trying to understand how to get through this. Not over it, not away from it, but get through it. Um, how did you return to your work and your passion, the sensual movement, and all those other different things in the throes of Sean's passing?
So at first, it's like there was nothing. I was down for the count. And some days I still feel like, damn it, I'm down for the count. Leave me alone. Time out. With the sensual movement, it's weird because about a year and a half, like before his passing, like I had really started going hard with that again because 2020 came and put me down for the count. I can't teach classes. I can't have people here. And even though, we can do the online thing, I'm really more of a women's circle kind of gal. And having the room filled with people is a really different energy to me than trying to bring that same energy online. Because I feel like sometimes online, we're not always 100% paying attention, right? Like you could be online, but if the TV's on over there or if something's going on over here, you're not fully engaged. And so,
And if their camera is not on, it's like,
then are you really
because
even
we know when our camera is not on because we are mixing. Yeah, yeah.
even here if your camera is not on? And so, you know, I was like, I'm not going to neglect this. My biggest thing with that was I have been teaching sensual movement for years. And it didn't matter why people came to the class or why people came to the practice, right? It's like yoga or Pilates. Like people come for many different reasons.
It is not. I'm just gonna say that you
It is.
guys you guys need I'm not even y'all need to go check out her videos because it is sensual movement. Um, I'm just gonna say that. And I think you really need to do yourself a favor to find my girl on YouTube, TikTok, wherever she has this at. And
We're put together like a class for us widowed ladies for you to really like.
I'm gonna take you up on that.
No,
Okay.
I'm serious because
I
you
am
know,
too. You know I have events. So this
please,
okay. I'm
please.
okay. We're gonna talk about this after the podcast, but I want you guys to stay tuned. I'm not sure if it'll be on Zoom or something. We'll do a TikTok live or maybe both, but noted. Yes, ma'am.
Because
Okay.
it looks very intimidating. Like it looks like
Now, it
some
looks very sensual, is what it looks.
but you know what? That tapping in and tuning in, like the biggest thing is it's about slowing down. It's about slowing down. It's literally about learning how to slow down because we do the foundational moves from Pilates and from yoga and from ballet and bar. That is kind of what it's derived from. But yes, when you take a head circle from traditional fitness to slowing it down 4 times the speed, yeah, it feels different in your body and it looks different on the outside.
Okay, do a sensual movement head roll. Since you did the quickie wiki, I want you to show
You
your
know,
version.
you have to slow it down and you have to inhale and you're moving and inhaling and then you're exhaling, but it's so slow that you can feel everything that's going on in your neck. every sensation, and then we invite the element of touch, because as a widow, even for sure, we understand how important physical touch is. And I'm not talking sexual touch, just physical touch in general. And you can physically touch yourself. We can comfort ourselves sometimes.
That
And
right there, I know some widows that live alone that have not been hugged,
yeah,
that have not been touched because their spouse died.
yeah,
And just feeling sexy for your own dang on self.
yeah,
You're giving
exactly.
yourself permission to do that. This is going to be so cool to do
It's
this.
so powerful. It unlocks so many levels. And that's why I say it almost like it doesn't matter why people come to the practice. Some people want to lose weight. Some people are trying to connect to their feminine side. Somebody told them about it, and but people stay because you reach this point of connection. You slow down and you start breathing. But for me, I've been showing people how to slow down and come into their bodies to move through certain things for a really long time. So now I am the one that is down for the count, and maybe I should use my own medicine.
Hmm.
And so that's what I do. I practice sensual movement because it has always been a feel good medicine. No one ever leaves getting to yoga is the hardest part, but no one leaves yoga and they're like, huh, I wish I wouldn't have came. Like, you don't have an attitude of I wish I wouldn't have came after yoga. When you leave yoga, you feel refreshed and you feel loose and you feel like you've let something off and you feel happy and namaste, and you're ready to tackle, even if it's the next hour, and your body, right? Like, if you can't afford therapy, if you can't, like, there are other tools. Our body and our breath sometimes are all it takes to initiate like a space of healing for yourself.
Now you
uh
say breath. I'm breathing all the time. What are you talking about in difference to that?
and
I'm breathing.
intentional breath work. uh and you can say meditation. They go hand in hand. I wouldn't necessarily say breath work and meditation are the same, but they're a stepping stool, right? One is with the other. But to breathe very intentionally, Tina, because you are breathing all the time. You've been breathing this whole time. You probably haven't paid not one thought or attention to your breath because it's automatic. It just happens. But things that are automatic and just happen, we take them for granted. They're too easy, right? But if I were to have you close your eyes for just 1 second and roll your shoulders back and sit up nice and tall and straight, and take a really deep breath in through your nose and just hold it at the top, and just hold it and just hold it, and then open your mouth and very audibly just let that breath out and allow your shoulders to just fall down, relax. It feels weighty. It's
Hmm.
different. And there's so many different types of breathing and different styles of breathing that can help, and they regulate our blood pressure, different type. One thing about Shavonde, when he would go to the doctor, they would always try to tell him that his blood pressure was high. And he would always want to roll his eyes and stuff because they would immediately be trying to put him on some type of pills. Oh, your blood pressure was this over this today. Do you have high blood pressure? Well, why don't we get you on a and he would be like, whoa, I'm not taking anything. Like, hold on. And he said this one nurse came in one day and she was like, you know what? I'm going to come back and I'm going to take your blood pressure. I want you to do something for me. I want you to take about 20 deep breaths when I leave, just slow like this. And she showed him what to do. And she left the room, came back, blood pressure was down, perfectly normal range. The way that we breathe, the way that we sit, even, but the way that we breathe when we're erratic, our breath gets heavy, when we're under pressure, under stress, we have shallow breath. We don't breathe at full capacity of our lungs, usually ever, until you get intentional about it. And then if that's regulating, that helps with anxiety, that helps with stress, that helps with lowering cortisol, all of these things that are heavily increased when we experience grief.
Yes. I mean, I'm going to read this statement, and I would like for you to expound upon it.
Mhm.
This is not TikTok. You can drink as you want.
Okay. My Starbucks is over here getting watered down.
Drink that. She also creates beautiful handmade waistbands, which serve as a tangible reminder for women to stay connected to their bodies, goals, and intentions.
In 2018, I was having one of those, I'm down for the counts again. My life, but I think that this is a part of self-improvement for me, right? Like I always have these evaluative, I know that's not a word, but always have these moments of evaluation where I'm looking at things and I'm looking at my life and I'm like, okay. And I'm a firm believer that if you don't like what you are looking at, change it, because you can. It might take little itty bitty steps, but you can change it. And one day you'll look out at that same view and it'll be totally different because you can change it. And I was down for the count for about 2 weeks because I felt like I want to hear from God. I don't want to make any moves. I don't want to do anything else. I want to hear what I am supposed to do and where I am supposed to be headed at this point, because I need to know. Like, Lord, you need to show me something. I'm just going to be quiet and sit still. Stillness. That's the key. I'm going to be still until you say something. And I didn't do anything. I felt like a bum. And for me, if I'm not doing something, and I know that that's not true, but if I'm not doing something, I feel very like useless, right? Like I have to always be doing something. And so I was like, no, I don't have nothing to really do because I'm doing things in vain. I'm not going to do anything. And I didn't. And for 2 weeks, I just mommed. That's it. And I've always been a stay-at-home mom, but I've always had me like a side hustle, or like I know that I'm purposed to do things. Like I know that I am called to help people. And so I can't just sit around and do nothing. But anyways, I did. One day I was on the couch, I was lost in the scroll, and I happened to see on Instagram these waist beads. And I was like, ooh, those are really cute. They reminded me of belly chains because when I was a teenager, like we used to put the little belly chains on and they were super cute. And so I started looking into them. And again, this was completely one of those things that I was led there. I didn't know what I was looking at or why I was even attracted to these, but I was very attracted to them. I started doing some research on them and I started finding, I feel like I'm a firm believer that God always leads me to the right people. I am always being connected with the right one at the right time. And so I found one person on Instagram and I was just like, wow. And I had my share of reaching out to people as someone in their field, as a beginner, asking for help and assistance. And I feel like women can be really mean sometimes, especially like in the pole dance industry. When I was first starting like my movement studios and all that stuff back in the day, it's like no one is going to help you with anything. People just like they hoard information as if there's not enough room for all of us to win. And so I learned a long time ago, ain't nobody going to help you. You're going to have to figure it out. But I do my due diligence. I didn't reach out to nobody. I did my own research. I did everything. But like my waist beads, they're just beads. This is one I just happen to have right there. And so like this one has a citrine crystal on it. And they're just made with glass seed beads and stones. And these are traditional tie-on. So it's an African tradition. And different African cultures wear waist beads. They're not really made to be seen in certain cultures. They're worn under your clothes, but it's a permanent body jewelry. And once it ties on, it's on. You wear it all the time. Here in America, we like to show them off. You probably walk around, you see women wearing waist beads all over the place. I love summertime because I got a bunch of them on. But the premise of this was a communicative tool as well, because when you were on your period, like you would put on a certain band that let your partner know, not this time. They were made to accentuate the hips and the waist. So it was a very sensual tool. They were beautiful, like to be adorned in this body jewelry. And what I noticed when I started deciding to tie them on other women was that once these beads got tied on and you looked in the mirror, you saw beauty in a belly that maybe 10 minutes before you got to me, you were just pinching at, talking about it, being rude to yourself in the mirror, having that negative shower talk when you get out of the shower and you, and, oh, my pants don't fit, my mushroom top. And we pick ourselves apart as women, and here this simple piece of beautiful jewelry you can put on and wear and you feel better. And then on top of that, it's like a tool, because when you eat too much, you expand. When you're allergic to things, your body expands. When you put certain things like gluten and stuff in your body, it expands. And we don't always recognize this right away. But when you have these beads on, let me tell you, because mine are cutting off my circulation now. I know I've gained some weight, and they're so tight that every day I am like, okay, I'm just going to cut them. I'm just going to cut them. But my weight tracking bead that I've had it on since 2018 when I started making these. I've had it on for 5 years. So it's tighter than it's ever been, Tina.
But life is tighter than it has ever been.
Bigger than I've ever been, Tina. But
okay. So hold on. Sometimes you got to eat through your feelings. Sometimes and sometimes I don't recommend a lot of it. Sometimes people drink through their feelings. We're talking about coping skills, healthy and unhealthy. Sometimes we are lethargic and we cannot maintain our regular workout routine. The idea of leaving home because outside of this house, the world is going on. And in my life, everything has shut down.
Yeah.
The idea that I just can't not take a shower because those kids really need to eat and I'm responsible for doing that. And you get them all to school and then you just sit in the car and cry because you don't want to go back home to this half a life that you don't have. Yeah, them beads will be okay later, but it's like you only have enough energy to do this or that part. And that's about as all we can do, and that's enough sometimes.
And even watching them, right? Because it once again becomes a part of intentionality.
Yes.
So for me, I always have to be extra. If I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna try to do it a little better than the person before me. But I feel like I started learning about color psychology and how colors affect us, and how being in or around or wearing a lot of a certain color can have an effect on like our mood and our attitude. And so in learning about the colors, I design beads very specifically with certain color blends. Or when I get clients, I will ask them, in 3 words, let me know what you're looking to call into your life at this time. And maybe that looks like strength, happiness, and peace. Well, you're talking red, yellow, and blue. And now I'm going to design you a very specific bead with the colors for that which you're looking to call into your life. And you're encircling this around your belly. You're tying this
Your
on
core.
your core to wear every day as a reminder of that which you're looking to bring forth. Birth. So we get real intentional about the waist beads.
I'm glad I asked that. I know we've covered a lot, and then sometimes people go, I don't think I can talk that long. Then it's like, what time is it? Like, wow, that can go really far. Is there something that you have a question of me that you would want to ask?
What did you do, Tina, I think, to start managing your space of grief? And how did that birth into all of this work and this nonprofit that you have and that you're doing? Like, what did that incubation look like for you in that dark space, right? Like, things are born out of the dark, right? So what did that dark space look like for you?
That's a good question. The first thing that I did, started seeing a therapist. Mark and I had been together for 32 years, and we were on vacation, and he went into cardiac arrest, and I came home from vacation by myself. We made love the night before like ain't nobody's business. And I'm like, who does that? Who does how disrespectful you are, sir. I mean, proper goodbye and everything, but what? And I remember just thinking, where's the manual for it? Where's the instructions? Where's the details? Before we had children, we read that book, What to Expect When You're Expecting. And a friend sent me a book, I Wasn't Ready to Say Goodbye by Dr. Pamela Blair. And I had no idea how instrumental that book was going to be for me learning how to not lose myself in this. I started seeing a mental health professional every week for months. And then she moved me into a group with other women. And I did not want to be at home. Both of my children were adults. They are now in the military. And now I am in this house by myself. I'm driving home from work to this house, sitting in the driveway, crying, not wanting to go in because there is nothing waiting for me but sadness. But I'm going to lean into it, girl. Okay. I remember sitting in the house and I was mad at everybody. I was mad that Mark died. I was mad that Catherine and Alex left me in the house alone. And I remember a guy saying, so what you going to do? You in the house by yourself? You're here, do something. And I was like, the house was a museum to everyone else. So I changed my son's room into a guest room because people were coming to visit. I changed what was our game room downstairs to my exercise room. I changed what was my daughter's bedroom into my study and my prayer room because I needed to live. I remember one day coming home and I was thinking about eating dinner and I thought about the plates that I was going to use were the plates that my dead husband and my dead mother-in-law liked that I never could stand. I went to the store and brought some more plates because I was like, I'm not doing that. I started looking at every place to stop running and start leaning in. I remember not wanting to go to the grocery store we went to because there were so many memories of Mark. But then I thought, if I stopped doing everything that we did together, I would have no life left. And I'm still alive. And then I needed back to not having a manual. I read the book, but I need to talk to other widows or widowers. And so I looked at my phone book. I'm like, dang on it. That person's a widow. That person's a widow. That person's a widow. And I called them and they was like, oh, I'm so sorry. But then they pulled back the veil and told me all the sugary that was in my head that I was afraid to articulate because surely I'm the only one out here, this cuckoo from Cocoa Puffs dealing with this. But when they validated that, I knew I still had to do the work myself, but I knew that I wasn't wrong in this journey. I have been blessed to have an immense network of committed family and friend members. I have not lost one friend and not one family member has told me it's enough. And I realize that's a bit of a unicorn because as I speak to other people, very shortly into the timeline of losing their spouse, people start disconnecting, become disingenuous, not wanting to hear and understand. And I was like, how awful, how awful for someone to feel like they are alone when they need people the most. And I realized if this is not a place you've traveled, you don't have the emotional bandwidth or tools to understand. But if you're able to listen to a conversation of two people speaking, it may give you the ability to step in for a friend that you didn't know how to ask those questions, but you can be the silent person. There are people that listen to the podcast and they go, that's helped me support my family member who's going through that because I would never want to ask them that. And there was a family member who had lost a spouse, and I spoke with them, and I just felt God's charge to step in and create space. And you mentioned something about how often people gatekeep. We don't have time for that. My whole husband died. If there's something I can share that is going to help, I mean, for you to tell me that you showing up in November to that grief support group that I had, and you had been on social media, you had connected with people, done different stuff, but you needed somebody to be present, somebody to be who they represented themselves to be, not somebody trying to get something from you or do something else, but to genuinely hold space in my most lowest moment and tell me there's another day coming. I'm still writing my journey. That is powerful and encouraging to me that I am serving humanity how I know God has charged me to do, because nobody should be alone in doing this. This sucks. This is hard. This is difficult. This is pain unimaginable that you cannot articulate to express to anyone. There is no amount of verbiage that I feel like does it justice. But when you're in the space with someone else who says, yeah, I lost my spouse, it's been 2 years, your mind, like a Rolodex, thinks, ooh, 2 years. You just got your brain back. Like you start thinking it could be a little bit of an ish, but it's a range that happens. And you don't have to qualify to give that gift to somebody is never the superpower I wanted. But just as you said in your own, she has since aimed to transform her pain into a source of passion and purpose, openly sharing her grief story and offering valuable insight on grief and healing through online platforms. We are sisters in that scenario. I love the ability where you say, I'm just not going to get stuck here. And I know that is difficult to say I'm not going to get stuck here because Mark's still dead. That's not changing. There are no take backs. There is no, this is mine, keep it, you stay. That
Right.
is so permanent. But I do know the narrative I have told myself changes my perspective and outlook. On the 1 year anniversary of Mark's passing, because we were in a hotel on a military base in Delaware, driving past that installation shook my world. I had to go stay there at the 1 year anniversary because I had to take my power back. Because every time I drove down the highway past that, I was incapacitated driving. And I was like, no, I'm coming for you because you've been coming for me. And I took all the cards that people gave us the day of his funeral. I went back. I tried to go to the restaurant we went to, and I cried and I wept. But when I left that room, I never had a problem driving down that highway because I can't be crippled. Life is too short and I want to live it. But at the same time, I do understand that some people want to stay in that space. I understand that fortunate our society equates how long I'm sad and horrible and miserable with how much I love my spouse. And that is not an equation that is realistic. Oftentimes, our society does not give women the validation and empowerment to continue thriving and living a life because their spouse died. And if you love them, how are you still doing that? Because I didn't die.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
that is also, you mentioned communication. It is so important to talk to your spouse about what happens when the inevitable happens. Because one thing, we are not going to stay here forever.
Yep.
So what happens when one of us is not here? Mark and I had those conversations. I didn't have to think twice about knowing that I get to continue living And my husband would be pleased with my decision to do that. And the more that I'm able to show up in spaces with people, men and women, we have a men's only grief support group that meets the second Thursday of the month. Because we know men won't talk about their feelings. But if they don't, it's inside bubbling and it needs to come out. And it's better to come out in a safe space. There's a gentleman who actually became a widower in 2017, like myself, and he leads that group. The opportunity to serve humanity, because I have a full-time job. There's nothing I get from this but just knowing that I'm doing what I know God has charged me to do and to help people.
That's awesome.
It blows my mind because I'll tell you this, our content right now is across 99 countries and over 3.4 million views.
You would have never thought. It's like, wow. Like, look at the reach. Look at the reach just from being open and willing to
Yes.
share, be there. And I agree. I feel really rewarded when somebody can say, thank you for sharing that because that really helped me, or thank you for sharing that because I thought that I was the only one who felt that way, or it just, I don't know, it pumped you up a little bit. It feels good because it's like, I started sharing because I didn't have nobody to talk to. But if it's helping you, then yes, like, because then that's helping me. It makes me want to keep on sharing and wanting to find. But I agree, like you said, we don't have I mean, at least I don't think. I'm gonna have to Google that, the what to expect when you're grieving book. We might need to throw that thing in motion if it's not already. Oh, okay, I'm like, look, is that already a title? Because listen,
it sounds like chicken soup for the soul. We could do that. We could do that.
I need to put it on because there isn't. And even though, like, yes, there's books, and we can find a small section of things on the shelf, and maybe more recently, maybe especially probably since the pandemic, people have taken it upon themselves to write more and put more into the space, but there is no manual. And a lot of what I have just researched and learned and heard just being in these spaces with other people, and then looking up statistics and looking up stuff, this is real. This is not just like, oh, somebody died and how society, it's just you go on back and that's
3
just
days,
it.
get back to work.
Is real shock to the body. This is real stress. This is real sickness that people incur because these are real broken hearts that can cause a higher rate of death amongst widows. Like, this is not a joke. It's like that video I made the other day. Like, grief is like a medical emergency, and we don't see it that way at
Because
all.
people just think your person died. Okay, I know you're sad. The
Right.
32 different things the way grief impacts your body. All these different things laid out. When Mark died, and I was like, by nature, I'm a high functioning person. I'm a retired Army officer. I'm a project manager. I'm used to doing stuff. I woke up and was like, I now also have a superpower that I can stare at paint. No offense to all the men, but when you ask a man, they go, "What are you thinking about?" and you say nothing, I can do that. That is not something I was able to do, but my cognitive was impacted by Mark's death. For me to go and read and find out that grief fog and my all, like, okay,
Absolutely.
yes.
Cortex, it messes with the fact that your body is supposed to produce things to protect it, and you go into fight or flight. Like, this is real.
But knowing that let me know when I was staring at the paint, my body, this is what my healing looks like. That validated it for me. That gave me permission to know, okay, so I started getting little memo pads since I couldn't remember none. I just write it down. I was like, all right, since we got to reboot every day like dog day afternoon, let me write down the stuff I'm supposed to do because I'm not remembering like normal Tina break.
Mhm.
But that is super important. I'm gonna ask you. We could go on and on. I'm not going to do that to you. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about in this conversation that you feel like we didn't cover or wanted to make sure that we address? Because I want to pull us back, or we could go down that rope and be like, okay, I'm going to pull us back up.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I was just open to wherever the conversation went.
And I say thank you for myself, and I say thank you for every listener, and for the widowhood and being transparent and being willing to have this conversation. I'm going to let you wrap up this discussion with our listeners.
Me. I will just end on this note, just with everything that we've just said. I made a post the other day, and it was in regards to something that I had heard from, I don't think he's a pastor anymore. His name is John. I cannot pronounce his last name. It starts with an O. It's really long. But he spoke about grief and how we liken grief to a journey, but that grief is more like a language. When we go on a journey, we pack our bag, and typically a journey means that there's a destination or an endpoint. We're going somewhere. But with grief, there is no final destination. It's been 11 years since my brother passed away, and we're coming up on July the 6th. And every 4th of July, it's still a strange day. The feelings that we feel in the beginning, they won't always be as intense, and it won't always impact us as deeply as it does in that beginning. But it's all a part of a process, and we are still here. And because we are still here, that process is a part of your progress toward your purpose. Whatever that ends up looking like. I had a vision board book that I wrote back in 2018, and it's this process that pushed me to go ahead and just put the book on Amazon. Like, we don't know where it's leading. So maybe journey is not the right word, but when we learn a new language, we got to kind of study it. We got to be in it. The only way to grasp it is to start hearing conversations, watching movies, listening to the language be spoken. And as we start to learn and adapt, we can speak that language and we become fluent. And that's what he was saying, was that the goal of learning a new language is to find fluency, to gain fluency so that you can hold the conversation. And I like that because it takes the pressure off of, oh, somebody died, I'm on a grief journey now, because that gives us this destination that we think we're supposed to be at. And then we have a societal 5 stages of grief that you have to be in this part of your journey and in that part of your journey. It's not a journey unless you're on the journey for the rest of your life, because that's kind of what we're going to be. I feel like if grief is supposed to be all of this love that we hold for someone else, then you're always going to grieve the someone else, because you're not ever going to stop loving them, no matter how many years it's been. And if grief is love, then you love them forever. So you learn to adapt, you learn to grow, you learn to move through, you learn how to be in it, and it will get better. And on that note, that's a wrap.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Tina. I really appreciate you having me here today and validating me and hearing my story and allowing me to share it with your listeners.
Thank you for spending another episode with Widowhood Real Talk. If you found the contents of today helpful, share the episode to anyone you know who may need it. Subscribe to the show and tune into Widowhood Real Talk each week. Then visit widowhood-realtalkwithtina.org to join the community and access additional resources. Remember, you are not alone in this journey.